Horror, romance, splatterpunk, erotica. These are all very different genres, yet in this case, they're all from the same mind. In 2021, he was nominated for the Splatterpunk Award for Slaughterbox, a Diablo Snuff story, and in 2022 for The Maddening, Book 5 in the Diablo Snuff series. Carver Pike is truly living proof that if you set your mind to it, you really can do it all. I first discovered Carver Pike on social media when I received a recommendation to read The Foreign Evil, the first book in his Diablo Snuff series. As soon as I read it, I was hooked. Of course, I had to do some research and discovered that he has a pen name as well, which you're going to hear about that later, that led me to his stories of erotica. Since then, I've been following him, joined him and his many other fans in his Facebook group called Carver's Blog, and read and reviewed several of his books and will continue to do so. But of course, why listen to me talk about how awesome he is when you can hear from Carver Pike yourself? Hi, how are you?
Good. How's it going?
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be on your show.
Thank you. So, okay, let's start with the obvious. Tell everybody who you are for those who may not know.
I'm horror author Carver Pike, totally indie published as of right now, anyways. I'm kind of known as splatterpunk extreme horror, but I'm not always like some of my stuff is, but not all of it. So, yeah, I guess that's kind of a quick way to describe me.
Do you ever plan to work with an actual publisher, or are you going to stick with straight indie?
I don't know. I don't not plan to. Let's put it that way. I was at one point with a very small publisher way back in the day before I was even really before I was even writing horror. I was doing just dark fantasy at the time. And since then it just left a sour taste in my mouth. Things didn't really work out with that small publisher. And since then I just realized I could do a lot of this stuff myself. And so for the past 8 years or something like that. I've just been doing it myself, but it's not something I wouldn't take into consideration or that I'm not, anything I'm against really. It's just hasn't played out that way. So I've just been kind of going at it alone so far and having a good time with it. So
Well, it seems to be working out for you. I mean, you have quite a collection of stories here. It looks like you started out with Edge of Reflection series, correct?
yeah, that was actually the series that was with that small publisher. It was just under,
Okay.
I had different titles, different covers. They were a little bit more tame. Like I definitely ramped up like the sex and stuff and the graphic violence and made them more for this audience that I have now. But that was, yeah, that was my first series ever. So that's what
Well,
started it all.
so that's when you went in. After that, you went into more of the splatterpunk genre, where you
Yeah.
brought in more of the grotesque and that sort
Yeah.
of thing.
Well, actually, from that, I went into erotica because I actually have a couple of pen names. And then as an erotic author, my love was always with horror. So as an erotic author, I was kind of doing that as kind of like to pay the bills and to develop like a readership and stuff like that because that was what was super popular and I kind of started that on a dare. Someone kind of dared me to try erotica, and so I just kind of was having fun with it really at first, and then I tried writing horror under that erotic pen name, and it didn't really mesh well. Like I didn't, the readers didn't really, the worlds don't blend all that well. So where a lot of people will tell you that they won't create different pen names and they'll just write whatever they feel like writing under the same pen name. I didn't feel that it worked that well for me. One problem I had was Amazon kept burying all my horror under my erotica stuff. So it was almost like they recognized the name, and as soon as I would publish a book, it would be lumped in with erotica. So my horror
Really?
stuff was being thrown into like the erotic kind of like slush bin, and was back then they had, I don't, it's not really the case anymore, but back then in order to find erotica or 18 plus books and stuff, you had to go into Amazon as a reader and click somewhere. There was like a checkbox kind of where you said you wanted to find that kind of material.
Mm-hmm.
So if you didn't know to go do that on your Amazon account, you wouldn't see books that were considered erotica or like probably what would even be extreme horror right now.
Really?
So a lot of readers that I was trying to like show my horror to weren't finding them because they were also being thrown into that stuff with my erotica because they were being considered, erotic content, even though they weren't really. So,
Huh. That's interesting. I really didn't know that.
yeah. So I was so to answer your question, really. So I went from that dark fantasy to erotica, then tried to write horror under the erotic pen name, realized it wasn't working, and then decided to separate it. So I just rebranded kind of the horror and created the Carver Pike pen name, and then started doing horror completely separate. And that's really where I spend most of my time now. I still do kind of dabble in some dark romance and erotic kind of content, sort of, but most of my time is spent in horror now.
Well, I would say, I mean, this is just my opinion, but judging on the Diablo Snuff series, you kind of blend the erotic as well as the horror like together.
Well, that's that the first Diablo Snuff book of Foreign Evil was the first horror book I wrote. So
Really?
that one, and then I think that one, and then Shadow Puppets, I believe, was the second one. And if you've read that one, that also has a lot of very graphic sex in it. So you can see how they also got lumped in with the erotica. So I was writing
Yeah.
erotica, and then my horror did have some graphic sex in it. But a lot of horror does. I mean, if
Oh,
you
yeah.
look at it, hell, even Bentley Little, who is definitely not considered an erotic horror author, he has
Yeah.
some very graphic scenes in it. I mean, I read at 12 years old, I read Dominion, which has an orgy in a vineyard. I mean, but you wouldn't find that in the erotica section on Amazon. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
Oh,
hell,
yeah.
you wouldn't even find 50 Shades of Grey wasn't being thrown into the erotic section on Amazon. I mean,
Really?
you were seeing that in ads, and it was all over the place. But my books were being hidden like in that erotic section where you couldn't really find them, so it wasn't mainstream, so.
Wow. Wow. So, okay. So, where did you get? I have to ask about this series because personally, it's my favorite. I have read the entirety of the Diablo Snuff series, and I will tell you that The Grindhouse is the first book that I have read in a long time that literally kept me up. I couldn't go to sleep after I read that book. That's horrible. But where did you get the idea for that particular series?
That's awesome. I'm glad. That's awesome to hear that. I'm sorry I kept you up, but that's awesome to hear. Well, it was never meant to be a series, really. So when I wrote A Foreign Evil, I was living in the country of Panama, and the book takes place in Panama.
Mhm.
And A Foreign Evil is really short. I mean, it was basically novella length, probably.
Yeah.
And it was meant to have a cliffhanger. It was meant to be like a lot of horror movies where at the end it kind of leaves you hanging, makes you think a little bit, like, man, I wonder if Diablo Snuff is really out there, if there's something like that, preying on people. Because Diablo Snuff is kind of like a sinister organization out there that, as you read through the series, because technically the series is 5 books,
Hmm.
um, every book is completely different. And Diablo Snuff is just this evil organization that kind of shows up in all of them and puts people through these different scenarios in each book. And so the first book took place in Panama, and it involved these push button hotels that really exist in Panama, kind of fly by night. These hotels where it's all very discreet, and a lot of people go there. They take their lovers and stuff like that there because you don't actually see the workers at these hotels. So money takes place through kind of like a mail slot in the door. So you never actually see the person that's taking your money and stuff like that. So a lot of people will take like prostitutes there, or they'll take like their lovers and stuff like that there. So, anyways, the guy takes a woman there, and they some bad stuff happens there. It's been compared to kind of like Hostel and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So that was the first book. It was never meant to have a sequel. And then I had a nightmare one night that was so vivid that I to this day I've never had a nightmare that was that. I mean, you've read The Grindhouse, so I mean everything. I don't want to give like a lot away, but even like the kids that were in it with the wooden masks and the pitchforks and stuff like that,
Hmm.
that was in the dream. The guy with the trench coat that goes to hand him the newspaper with the cockroach that runs out of his sleeve, that was in the dream. The two brothers with the sister, the creepy kids in the hallways and stuff
Yeah.
like that. I mean, almost every aspect. There were a few things, of course, I had to add to make the story cohesive and kind of come together.
Yeah.
But for the most part, all of the main parts of that book came from this dream. I mean, I woke up and had an outline almost completely together just from this nightmare. So I knew right away. I was like, man, that would be a perfect sequel to A Foreign Evil. And it's weird because it's a sequel, but it's kind of not. Like all the
Right.
books tie together in some way, but they just kind of involve some of the same characters and stuff like that. But they don't really. You can read books 1, 2, and then the 2 side stories, which are Passion and Pain and
Hmm.
Slaughterbox. You can read those in any order, really,
Yeah.
as long as you read the final book, The Maddening, last. So because that does touch on all the other books and all the characters and stuff. So, and The Maddening is actually up for a Splatterpunk Award, which takes place this weekend in Texas at KillerCon. So fingers crossed.
Oh wow!
Yeah, I
Congratulations.
think it's. I don't know if they're. Thank you. I don't know if they're announcing the winners tomorrow or if it's Saturday, but it's this weekend. So,
Oh, that's so
Maddening
awesome.
is actually up. Slaughterbox was nominated last year. I didn't win, but that was the fourth book in the series was nominated
Yeah.
last year. So, but yeah, so I'm super excited about the series. I love Diablo Snuff, and even though the
It's
fifth book is the final one in the series, I'm not going to say that Diablo Snuff is over because Diablo Snuff is always out there, so there's always potential for. Did you make it all the way through this? You made it through the whole series?
I made it through the whole series.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. It's all fantastic, but seriously, there's been one movie in my entire life that's kept me up to where I couldn't go to sleep. And one book, and Grindhouse is that one book. That book terrified me for some reason.
That's awesome.
I was having really bad visions after that book.
I want to do audio. I want to do audiobooks, but I really want to read them myself. I just think it's kind of cool when the authors read the book themselves.
Oh, that'd be
Um,
great.
it's just so time consuming. Like I have the microphone for it. I have the stuff, the equipment and everything, but it's just it really I'm a slow reader as it is, and then you have to edit, the files and stuff, and
Yeah.
it's just the time it'll take to do it. So I have to either decide to do it or pay a narrator and just have it done for me. But because I really need to I don't have any of my books on audiobook right now. So
Diablo Snuff would be a great audiobook, especially if you could read it just right or get the right narrator. That would be
yeah,
fantastic.
I would have a hard time with the sexual parts because there's a lot of moaning and shit that I wrote in there, especially coming from the erotica world. And I'm not moaning for the fucking microphone. I'm sorry. I refuse. I'm not moaning for the microphone. I'll just be
Oh my
like,
gosh.
he moans here. I'm not
Well,
doing
you
that
could
for
have
the mic.
that would be comic relief.
Yeah. Oh, she says. I'm not. Yeah,
Oh
I'm
my
not.
gosh.
Oh.
Okay. Moving on from that one, tell us about your most recent release, Faces of Beth.
So Faces of Beth, and I'm totally going to cheat here. I told you at the beginning of this. I'm reading what I put on TikTok for it because it's much shorter than the blurb on the back of the book, and I think it wraps it up better. So the blurb, the new short blurb from TikTok for Faces of Beth just says, newlyweds struggle to deal with the wife's mental illness while their family is tormented by a demonic presence. I think that's a quick, easy, short way. Like if it was a movie poster, I feel like that would be an easy way to kind of sum it up.
Yeah.
Because I don't, I want to rewrite the blurb that's on the actual book. I just don't think it did it justice. So this is the cover for Faces of Beth. I always
It's a
suck at getting
beautiful
it.
cover.
So thank you. With an awesome introduction by Brian Keene. Um, I love Brian Keene and the introduction that he wrote from this. I mean, the man, he's a legend, and everybody knows his name. And just, I mean, what he wrote in here literally brought tears in my eyes. I mean, it choked me up, and I mean, I'll read it a million more times in my life, I'm sure. But Faces of Beth is special to me. I feel like I mean, I've definitely grown as an author since A Foreign Evil. I mean, if you go back and I've even rewritten A Foreign Evil, like I've gone back to edit it since writing it the first time and stuff like that. But I think it shows my growth a lot, and it's definitely the most grown up of my books. I feel like, I mean, it tackles some serious situations and serious themes and stuff like that. And I feel like of all my books, it's probably the one I think would make the best movie. The most,
Yes.
I don't want to say realistic movie because there's stuff in there that's not so realistic. I mean, it's supernatural and things like that,
Yeah.
but you know what I mean? Like Diablo Snuff would be really out there. It would be great to see as a movie, but it's crazy. So,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, I just love Faces of Beth and I'm excited about it. And,
It's funny you said that about the movie thing. I actually told my aunt anything I read that I really, really enjoy, I'll tell her all about it. And as soon as I finished Faces of Beth, that was the first thing I said to her was like, this would make an excellent movie. I mean, there's no doubt about it.
I wish that would be awesome. So
I don't know how we could go about doing that, but we need to push for that.
I know, right? I got to try to get it into the hands of somebody at Netflix at least or something, one of the streaming
Heck yeah.
services. Man, I got to
What gave
find.
you the idea to go that route with that book? I mean, with the mental illness and, the whole content of it.
I don't.
The
It just hit
backstory.
me one day. I was actually the title came to me first. I was thinking, it was a play off of the old Faces of Death.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you remember the old Faces of Death videos and stuff
Oh, yeah.
back when I was in the military. So we're talking like I'm dating myself here, but the end of the '90s, early 2000s. I lived in like a bachelor pad kind of right outside the base military house. And my buddies a lot of times would go rent like the Faces of Death videos and stuff while everybody was over drinking and stuff like that. I don't know why that was like a part. It's horrible when you think about it, but it was like a party video that people would put on and stuff like that. Nowadays, half of that shit you see on YouTube and TikTok and stuff. I mean, but back then it was like
Yeah.
those were the extreme videos and stuff,
Oh,
But
yeah.
so I don't know. I was thinking of that somehow that came to me, and I was just thinking Faces of Beth was a cool kind of play of words, and that's why I tried to use a font that was very similar to the Faces of Death font.
Oh,
That's
it
on the
is. I
front.
didn't even realize that.
And so, and then it just kind of came to me. I don't know the idea. I just thought I don't want to say too much because I don't want to give away some
Yeah.
of the twists in the book,
Oh, no.
but but yeah, there's really not much I can say to answer your question without giving away. I almost just gave away some stuff in the book. Answering your question, I totally forgot. Yeah, I got to be careful with that. So
Yeah, I don't want
I've
you to give
actually
it
said
away.
too much a couple times and had people get mad at me who've read the book, saying like, "What? You can't say that." You're
No,
so,
no, you definitely can't give it away. Now, I want you to talk about it. I'll be honest, there's two of your books that I have not read, but I've heard great things about them.
okay.
So tell everybody about Grad Night and Scalp.
How did I know Scalp was going to be one of the ones you haven't read? Everybody stays away from Scalp. So first of all, I think you said you were going to show some covers, but I'm going to grab them because I have them here right next to me. I've got stacks of my books here because I'm actually in the process of building a new website where people can go order my paperbacks and get
Oh,
signed
awesome.
paperbacks easily. So, they
That's
just
something I
like
still have to do.
order.
I have read all of your stuff on Kindle, and it's killing me because I need to own them.
Well, I've always been like, I'm just lazy about giving people the information to get signed books. I don't mind. I love signing books and I don't
Yeah.
mind getting them out to people. I'm just lazy about posting about it all the time and stuff like that. So I'm trying to build one of those websites where it's really easy, where I can just say, go to this website. You can click, order the book. It lets me know. So I sign it to you and everything and send it and no problem.
Oh, awesome.
So let's go to Scalp first, since Scalp, it's the cover that drives everybody kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Scalp is about parasitic head lice. So I can see everybody like going, ew, yeah. So, so I live in West Virginia right now. I just moved here about 2.5 years ago. So it's based in West Virginia on a fictional town near where I'm actually living. And it starts out with a hunter who's hunting deer and he realizes that the deer is acting kind of weird. And when he shoots it, there's no spray of blood like there usually would be. And basically, these head lice kind of hop off of it and jump onto his cousin's head. Now, I've read the beginning of the book several times live and stuff like that. That's why I don't mind telling you the beginning of the book. But
Sure.
these head lice kind of jump off. And what they do is they jump onto your scalp and they kind of dig into your head and drill in, and there's blood running down and stuff. And they kind of race for one of them to take over your body. So they're parasites. One of them takes over, and it's kind of zombie like. and they just try to get you close enough to another human so that they can jump to the next person or animal. There's animals in there too that are taking over and stuff. So basically anything with hair.
Okay.
So it just so in this West Virginia town, these parasites are taking over these lice, and they're so there's the people in the town, but there's also this youth leadership conference taking place in this old kind of war memorial type place. And so there's these teenagers there, and then there's the townsfolk, and they're all battling these creatures that have been taken over by these lice and stuff. So it's pretty sick. It's kind of a creature feature, kind of zombie-ish. It's a lot of fun though, I promise. It's not as bad as you would think. Like everybody freaks out when they hear lice, but I promise it's not as bad as you would think. In fact, usually when I can convince people to actually read it, they come back and tell me how much they loved it. So I've been really pushing it like in the Books of Horror group on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
Like anytime somebody puts the picture up, a few people have put it up and said they loved it, and they're and then people under will go, "Oh my god, no way! I'm a teacher, or I work in a beauty salon. I wouldn't touch anything to do with lice." And then I go in and I comment to each of them and try to convince them to get it. And sometimes a few will buy it, and usually they'll come back and say how much they loved it. They're so glad they gave it a chance and stuff because I try to make it as fun as possible. It's not as bad as you would think. So, and it's kind of, I always think it's funny how these are people who read extreme horror. So, I mean, usually a lot of the books are dealing with like shit, like literally shit, like poop and like other weird, crazy stuff a lot of the times. And they'll read all that stuff. I mean, it could be people having sex with people's dead big toes and I mean, like weird, just random shit. And they're fine with it. But then you mention head lice and they're like, "Oh god, no, like I'm not touching head
but that's
lice."
a real
Like
thing. That is so gross.
like it's fucking head lice, man. It's like they're just I know they're bad, but they're not that bad. When I had the idea, I was like, "Oh, this is kind of cool," because I had read The Troop by Nick Cutter, which is one of my favorite books, and I had read what else did I read? Just a couple of things that had to do with parasites, and I like Darcy Coates' book Parasite. I like that.
Yeah.
And I like movies that have to do with parasites and stuff. And I always wanted to write something kind of similar, but I wanted to do something different too, And I'm like, head lice, huh? No one's ever done head lice, as far as I know. I've seen worms and things like that. There's a few movies where they're like worms or slugs and that type of stuff, but I've never seen head lice. But I didn't think it was going to cause the reaction that people get when they see head lice.
Okay, well, you've convinced me. I'm going to have to read it now. But if I'm cringing by the end of it, I'm going to message you about it.
Deal. And then grad night. So this is grad night. I actually wrote this when I was teaching in a foreign country. I was teaching over in Panama, and I was teaching high school. English is a second language. That's where I got the idea. I didn't start writing it, I don't think, at that point. I started writing it a little after that, but I got the idea when over there, a lot of times the students would invite teachers to their grad night parties. So yeah, I always thought it was a little bit weird that like when they're graduating, they would invite the teachers and the teachers were fine with it. Most of them would go and they would have drinks with the students and everything because over there at the age of 18, you could drink and stuff. And so it was like a normal thing. You'd see like the disciplinary teacher like having shots and stuff with like these kids.
Wow.
And I refused to go just because my mentality from being here was like, no way, man. Like all it takes is for one student to say, who maybe I failed them in class or I did, you know what I mean? Like I didn't give them the grade they thought they deserved or something. And then who knows at this party, they took a picture of me drinking with them or something like that. And it just, you know what I mean? Like things could backfire and come back to hurt you later. So I just thought it was always a bad idea. It was unprofessional.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, it gave me the idea for the book. So in the book, it's about this group of students that wants to get revenge on their teachers. And so they invite them to like a big grad night party and it's pretty sick and twisted. So it's a revenge story, but it's that one is definitely it's mildly extreme. Like it is kind of an extreme horror, but the interesting thing is I've actually had teenagers read it. I didn't give it to them. I mean, parents have actually like readers of mine have let their teenagers read it and they loved it. Like Candace, who's a reader of mine, her son was 14 and did a book report on it in class. He sent me the video of him reading it, like his book report in class. And then they wanted to
Wow.
give it to like the principal, somebody, I think it was, I can't remember if it was John Watson. I don't think it was John. Somebody told me they thought it should be like mandatory reading in all colleges or something like that. They felt like every professor should, anybody wanting to be like a teacher should have to read it in college or something.
Wow.
Because it
Oh my
also
gosh.
deals with a lot of themes. Like the funny thing is when I wrote it, I initially wrote it as just students getting revenge on teachers. Like I just wanted to come up with some really cool kill scenes and like fun stuff like that.
Yeah.
But as books often do, and you know, your characters often do, they kind of find a way to tell you the story on their own.
Mhm.
And I realized that each of the students had their own story. Like each of them actually had their own reason for why they were doing this, like why they wanted revenge on each teacher, like what, you know, each teacher had wronged one of these kids in some way at either, you know, for example, I'll just give you one example I remember was like um a teacher, I think he stapled like a McDonald's application or something to this kid's test or something like that in front of everybody or something to show him like that he was never going to amount to anything, that he was only going to serve fast food for the rest of his life or something like that, and like embarrass him in front of his classmates or something. And like, and so the lesson there, you know, is like how these little things you do, you know, you don't realize how much it hurts somebody, and like that sticks with
Yeah.
them and stuff like that, you know. And
Say
he'd already,
that's harsh.
and I think the kid had already graduated in the book, but it like was something that really stuck with him and made him feel like, you know. So like that's the kind of stuff that I discovered as I was writing it. Like each of these kids, you know, had a
Right.
reason for what they were doing. So,
Yeah.
but
Hmm.
anyway, so it was interesting to me because that wasn't the plan originally. It was just to come up with some really cool kill scenes and, you know, kill off these teachers in fun ways. But it turned out that they all had reasons for what they were doing, and that was, you know, revealed as the book goes on and stuff. So
Okay, I'm gonna have to read that one too. I'm falling so far behind. There's still like maybe 4 of your books that I have not read, those 2 included. But I've also read a lot of your erotica as well under your pen name. Why don't you tell everybody about that a little bit?
well, so Chris Genovese is my original erotica name. And Genovese is a real, it's not my real last name, but it's a real family last name. So my grandfather's last name was Genovese. And so it's like my mom's maiden name and stuff like that, like the Genovese mafia family. And so I started out using Genovese as Chris is my real first name. So I started using Genovese as my pen name. And originally I started writing kind of like erotic comedy. So I was writing the Maybe Mandy series, which was all
Mm-hmm.
almost like diary type books about this modern woman and her sexual exploits and just having a good time. And that was about it, really. There, and then I wrote the Daughters of Venus series, which was about this group of women living on the. It basically was about a post-apocalyptic kind of world where there weren't very many children being born, very many female children being born. So the remaining females were treated one of two ways. So either they were being kidnapped and kind of basically kidnapped by the remaining males and, you know, by the male population and stuff like that and mistreated, kind of like treated like slaves and stuff like that, or they were being coveted and treated almost like goddesses and stuff like that because there weren't very many women around. So those women went up on this mountainside and they created the Daughters of Venus, the doves, this community. And so up there, these women were allowed to take up to 3 husbands each. And so it's kind of like a reverse harem type of story. Before I knew what reverse harem was, I was writing this before I knew reverse harem was a thing. I was kind of pissed because I didn't know to use that as a keyword. Here I was struggling to get anyone to read my what turned out to be reverse harem. I was just trying to explain it as they could take up to 3 husbands. You
It's
know,
actually
like
that's
a
very
year or 2
popular
later,
right
I
now.
start hearing reverse harem. I'm like, the fuck is a reverse harem? And then I realized it, and I was like, "You mean to tell me that like other people are writing this shit, and like, you know, I could have been using that as like to get people to read it?" So, anyway, so I wrote 3 books in that series. It's called the Trouble with 3 Husbands. The Trouble with Virgins and The Trouble with Twins, I think, are the 3 titles of those books. And then I have one book that's all 3 stories combined. And then I don't know, I have quite a few books under Chris Genovese. So like I created the first 2 books in a Shark Shifter series. So
You
I
did
didn't
a
want
Shark Shifter series?
Yeah, so I didn't want to do werewolves. I wanted to do something different. And that was back when they had the Kindle Worlds thing. Millie Taden had a Kindle Worlds thing going on, so I joined hers and wrote one book in her world. It's not in her world anymore. I've changed everything, took out any mention of her stuff, but that's how it originally started. So the first book, they're not available in paperback. They're only available in ebook. In fact, yeah, they're available in ebook, but they're kind of weird. They're not even tied to. You have to look for them separately. I'm having issues with Amazon tying them together. There's some weird thing going on where they're not tying my books together as like a series. The first one's called "Oh Bite Me." So I basically I didn't want to do werewolves, so I did tiger sharks. I just thought it'd be cool to do shark shifters. So at the time there was only one other author I knew that was doing shark shifters. I researched it. I could only find one other author doing shark shifters. This was like years ago. So I did tiger shark shifter. So I did Oh Bite Me was the first one, and then Bite Me Harder was the series. The sequel. And then I still haven't written the third one, which is tentatively going to be called Just F and Bite Me. But I haven't written that one yet. I have the outline and everything for it. I'll eventually write it. And then my most popular, God, I have these books. They're just boxed up, so I can't really get to them yet. But Welcome to E. Mayberry is probably my most popular Chris Genovese book. And that is the wildest, craziest of my books. And it even has kind of a dark side to it. I think a lot of my Carver Pike readers would probably actually like that one. And that's the only one that's actually an audiobook too, is Welcome to E. Mayberry. It's my only book that's an audiobook. I didn't read that one myself, so I didn't narrate that one. And then I created the pen name C.M. Genovese, like Christopher Michael Genovese. That's my first middle name. Christopher Michael Genovese. C.M. Genovese is what I write MC romance, like motorcycle club romance. So more like, I really don't like to call it romance because it's actually way more like Sons of Anarchy. Like it's not so much romance at all. It's more like romantic suspense, if that. It's more like violence and action and stuff like that. There's definitely some romance. There's romantic elements to it, and there's some sexual stuff, but it's way more about the brotherhood and some romance, but with a lot of violence. There's even dark stuff in that. Like you can definitely see that I sneak some Carver Pike in there. Like the villain in that is a cult. So there's a cult called Red Chapel in there. So they do some pretty twisted shit in those books. So so there's my Razorblade Tumbleweeds MC is the main series there. And then I have a couple of books out under CM Genovese in the Royal Bastards MC also. And eventually I'm going to be writing with my wife, with Jules. So I think she's going to be writing under Jules Genovese. That's the plan right now. And we're going to do some stuff together, some MC stuff. So what have you read? I'm curious what you've read then under my other pen names.
Oh my goodness. I've read the Baby Mandy.
Okay.
I did not know that the whole Shark Shifter series existed, so I'm gonna have to read that.
So maybe Mandy is old. I almost wonder, like, I kind of worry when people say they've read that because I feel like my writing back then compared to now it's definitely changed. Hopefully it was still good enough back then.
I enjoyed it personally.
I'm afraid to go read it just because I know it's adapted a lot. You know what I mean? It's like, but
see, I'm majorly into romance, so I mean, it's weird. I watch horror movies, but I read romance and also write romance. So, and it's kind of funny that you said that about the reverse harem thing. Don't hate me, but I wrote one. So
you're one of them.
I am.
I knew what you were doing.
But let me tell you something though. You cannot explain to somebody what a reverse harem is. They do not understand.
Yeah.
I've had people that don't even know what a harem is. And I'm like, okay, it's when a guy marries a lot of women. So just reverse it. It's not complicated.
That's what. And now imagine not knowing even what the term reverse harem was and trying to explain what you were writing. All I knew was these girls could take up to several husbands, and now I'm trying to explain this whole concept, and I was just like, oh my god, selling it was a nightmare. I was like,
Yeah. But see, I got lucky. I already knew about what the tagline was, so I just used it. So it worked.
I've thought about rewriting those because they were really sex heavy, and I
Yeah.
felt but the storyline was great, and could if it was, it got better as like the third book I thought was awesome, like had a lot more. It definitely adapted and developed as it went on, but like the first book starts out pretty much in a sex scene, and I feel like it could have been developed way better. I mean, that was one of my first books too, so like I've thought about taking those, but it's just one of those things that you know how it is as an author. If you always go back and fix old stuff, you'll never move forward. So it's just
Exactly.
it sucks because it's like I have all these stories that I could probably make money with if I took the time to fix them up and revamp them, but I just then I won't write anything new if I'm always fixing old stuff. So
heck, I still have like 4 different tabs open on my computer, 4 different stories, and I'll get like over halfway through with them, and then like, okay, I'm gonna move on to something else, and I never go back and finish them. It
well,
drives
that's
me
the
crazy.
problem. That's the problem I've had with the Edge of Reflection series, because so those were the first books I ever wrote at all.
Mm-hmm.
They started out as screenplays, and I wrote them under my real name at one point, changed them for this pen name, and then broke them. They were 2 really thick books. I broke them up into 4 smaller ones because I felt like they were too intimidating to read as bigger books at the time for the audience that I was trying to sell them to. I was just like, I think they would do better if they were a little bit smaller. And you know what I mean? Like, I just felt like they were, being a newer author, I didn't have the readership to try to pitch these big books to people like that. So I broke them up into smaller ones and thought it would sell, like I could do better like that. So now I've got these 4 books, and I've contemplated whether to rewrite them in first person instead of third person. I've gone back and forth with these. And at this point, I've decided I need to just write book 5. But I mean, it's been, because I mean, this is a series that will potentially be up to 8 books.
Oh, wow.
But it's just constantly been adapting. Like I found out about Kindle Vella, and I've actually gone back and started to rewrite the beginning of book 1 in Kindle Vella form, like in that serial kind of format, to see if it would maybe inspire me to move, faster and stuff if I did that. And then I decided, no, I'm just going to keep them how they are and go back to write book 5. And it's just been a constant with that series. It's like my baby, my series, my baby was the first one, but I just need to figure out what to do with it. Like, and there are fans of that series that are pissed because it's been a while and I need to write the 5th book, but I want to do it right too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I do write fairly quickly, so I know if I just spent the time on it and focused on it, I could knock out the rest of the series. But I have to put everything else aside. I have to set down the horror stuff and set down the romance, everything aside, and focus on the fantasy stuff and just get that series finished. So, but it's a lot of work.
You'll get it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Don't lose hope.
Thanks for your belief in me.
Well, look, I don't want to keep you much longer, but I really do appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today and tell everybody about all your new stuff.
It's been fun. Thank you.
It has. Thank you so much. And I will make sure everybody knows where to find all your work.
You're great. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.
Bye. And there you have it, guys. Carver Pike was probably an interview that I have been more excited about than any others in quite some time. He is so much fun to talk to. He's very nice and personable. He interacts with his community. And as I mentioned in the end of the interview, I'll put the links to all of his different web pages, his Facebook group, and reach out to him. He's really a nice guy, and I promise you'll enjoy his work. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.